Want to appreciate Erik Ainge joining us this morning. His show kicks off in about 45 minutes, so I know he has got a lot of prep to do prior to that, so I appreciate you coming on, Erik. I kind of want to start, as I was doing research this week, preparing for you to come on, I remember watching you play in college, but I had no idea that you're from Oregon. What was so alluring about Tennessee, an SEC school, to a kid from Oregon, man?
Can you hear me good? Do I sound all right?
You're great, man.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I grew up, my Uncle Danny played for 14 years in the NBA, 3 years in Major League Baseball, and I grew up in Portland when he played for the Trailblazers. And I grew up in professional locker rooms around pros. So I knew when I was getting recruited and fed a line of crap. And a lot of coaches that were recruiting me were doing that. Phillip Fulmer just kind of said, hey, we have a needed quarterback. I'm going to take 2 quarterbacks, which I appreciated his honesty. And then he said, I don't know what other people are telling you, but he's like, one thing I'll promise you, I won't promise you playing time, but I'll promise you time reps with the ones in training camp. And I remember sitting there going, that sounds like something he can actually make good on. I mean, he's offering me an opportunity as much as anybody else on the roster. And I just kind of fell in love with that. And then I went to a game, and Vandy hadn't beaten Tennessee in like 24 years or something like that, and there were still 105,000 people there, which is more than you can fit in Oregon and Oregon State standing room only capacities. There's still, 5,000 seats left. In Neyland and just the South and SEC football and religion part 2, all that kind of stuff. I fell in love with it.
Erik, there's a lot of great Phillip Fulmer stories, and as a former player, a former quarterback of his, I'm sure you have a lot. Does one stand out amongst the rest?
Oh man, there's one time I threw a bunch of interceptions in a game. I was a freshman, and he brought a football into the quarterback room and handed it to me, and he said, "That's my wife's livelihood. That's my livelihood. That's all 3 of my daughters' livelihood. My grandbaby someday." He said, "This is way more important than a little piece of leather. Quit giving the damn thing to the other team, or you won't get to play." And I remember being like, "What?" And he made me hold it like a baby and rock it and treat it preciously. And he stopped giving this thing away. And it kind of worked. I still gave it away some, but the importance of everything kind of hit home.
Yeah, no pressure at all. No pressure at all put on you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of giving it away, that's been part of the problem in recent games with Garantano and this Tennessee offense that's lost 3 games in a row against 3 really good defenses in the SEC. Coming off the bye week, obviously the expectation is to win against a team that hasn't won a lot of games the last couple of years, but 2 so far this year with Arkansas. What's the mentality? What's the mood around this Tennessee program right now that I'm sure is disappointed on this 3-game losing streak?
For sure. I mean, gosh, the second half of Georgia was frustrating because of how well you played in the first half. Kentucky was a complete train wreck. You can't spot somebody 17 points and expect to win games in the Southeastern Conference. And that's kind of, with Arkansas, I like Sam Pittman a lot. And he was here for a few years when Chaney was here the first time, and I always really liked him. Never had a bad interaction with him. Philosophically, he teaches the line of scrimmage like I've been taught, like I've been schooled in it. I always appreciated that. He's doing a great job. He's got an opportunistic defense. Felipe Franks is playing better than I think most people outside of probably Arkansas thought or expected him to. But, Tennessee has to – I've been saying this all week on my radio show, guys. We've got to get to where we know exactly who we are. I guarantee if you asked any player on Arkansas's offense, they would tell you this is what we do, this is how we do it, and they would all know. Defensively, same thing. Barry Odom's doing a great job there. I feel like we are in slight identity crisis at times, trying to figure out exactly who we are and what we're best at and how to execute at a high level. And I think that's where some of the frustration comes. You can't just pick and stick when you're playing Alabama. Yeah. But that's okay. You don't have to beat Alabama. Not yet. Yeah. You got to be able to beat Arkansas. And Arkansas has an identity, and they understand what they're all about. And Tennessee's going to have to do a good job of forcing them to not be doing what they want to do. I mean, that's the whole game plan, right? I mean, it's how do we affect the other side of the ball? How do we put pressure on them to where they have to do stuff that's uncharacteristic of themselves? And I think it's the X's and O's matchups this weekend between coordinators on both sides of the ball is going to be really exciting.
Tennessee averaged 33 points a game in their first two games, only 15 points a game the last three against Georgia, Kentucky, and Alabama. How much of that, Eric, is a function of those three opponents and those three quality defenses, and how much of that is Tennessee just simply getting in their own way offensively?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think you blocked them up pretty good in the first half of the Georgia game. In the second half of the Georgia game, they weren't even blitzing. Their defensive ends were just speed rushing around the edge, and we weren't even getting a hand on them. They didn't even feel like they had to try to tackle Jared in the backfield. They got there so quick, they just would go straight for the football and knock it out of his hands. And that's tough. I'd have been more concerned if Jared's eyes would have been on the rush and not downfield. That's tough when you're sitting back there, and the next thing you know, there's a giant hand knocking the ball out. You're like, where did that guy even come from? Oh, my tackle didn't get a piece of him, didn't even slow him down. That's one thing that I wish Jared would do more of. I would have had a size 13 up a 300-pounder's butt if they wouldn't even have gotten a piece of him. You got to at least get a piece. You got to at least slow him down a little bit. I wish he would do, be more aggressive with his leadership like that. But the first pick six against Kentucky, the guy made a good play, flipped his hips really well. It's a pretty obvious play call. When you motion to stack, it's usually double ins or double outs. And they made a good play on it. And we ran that play twice the week before. I don't have a problem with that one. The second one, holding it, and throwing it way late down the middle of the field, that was terrible. That was a terrible interception. And he's only thrown 3 on the year. A lot of Tennessee fans are really, really hard on him, and I understand it because every time he turns the ball over, it seems to cost us a football game. But it's kind of like Arian Foster. You guys remember Arian Foster?
Oh, yeah.
Tennessee fans think, they're like, oh, fumble Foster, all that. He didn't really fumble that much. It just seems like every time he did, it cost us a football game. Jared's not a bad quarterback.
Talking with Erik Ainge, former Tennessee Volunteers quarterback, a part of the sports radio team at the Sports Animal here in Knoxville on the Morning Rush. Eric, one of the questions I had that Jeremy Pruitt was asked and answered on Wednesday night is about Harrison Bailey. He said Gary Tano is going to be the starting quarterback. Do you expect, now I asked Sam Pittman this yesterday, he expects that Garantano is going to play the majority of that game. Do you expect, as a former QB, to see Harrison Bailey get some snaps against Arkansas?
I do not, because I think the spread is accurate, and I think it's going to be a very good football game, and I don't expect either team to blow out the other one. And if that's the case, Felipe Franks is going for Arkansas and Jared's going for Tennessee, and we'll see how it goes from there.
Eric, you brought up Arian Foster. He was on that 2006-2007 team that you were also a part of. And I want to go back to a particular game in 2006 that unfortunately you weren't able to participate in because of an injury. I think you suffered against South Carolina the week before. That's when you guys traveled to Fayetteville, Arkansas, college game day in town. What do you remember about that game? What do you remember about that atmosphere? And what do you remember about Darren McFadden?
Man, the 2006 game was frustrating because that was probably the best team that I played on. And had we been able to win that game and then LSU afterward, we still would have, we wouldn't have won the East, but we would have been an 11-12 win football team. And I think when you look at the 07 game, I was back playing and we whipped Arkansas up front. Stopped, they still had McFadden and Felix Jones. What a loaded backfield! But we were able to go run the football, and that's kind of what I think. That's kind of what I'm thinking about this game this weekend. So, whoever can win the line of scrimmage, I think is going to win the football game.
All right, man. We appreciate your time and
yeah.
Thanks for joining us. All right.
Appreciate it. Erik Ainge coming on, former Tennessee quarterback, as part of the sports animal team there in Knoxville.